Hey y'all, welcome back to Mountain Murders Offbeat. I'm Heather.
And I'm Dylan.
We are back.
Oh, we're back.
We've had a little bit of a vacation from Offbeat,
Yes, we have.
but we're going to be continuing our series on weirdness in the nation's capital
There's plenty of weird stuff to talk about when it comes to the nation's capital.
without discussing the topics on this show. Haha. How you been, Dylan?
I'm doing great.
2022, 3 years of podcasting together.
Can you believe it's been
And
that
it's
long?
not gotten any better. Still drive me crazy.
I'm going to work on not driving you so crazy. But I think it's wonderful, and I can't believe we're still doing this.
I know, this is our 219th episode.
That is a lot of content.
It's a lot of content. Now, I have this idea, Dylan, this just wild idea, that we dip back into the archives. Some of the content where maybe our audio wasn't so great, we go back, re-record those episodes, release them into the wild for our listeners.
Ooh, that'd be a lot of fun.
You think so?
Yeah, I think so.
I mean, yeah, we might have a different spin on some of those cases now that we've been doing it for a while, but we owe it to our listeners because I think we have quality content even if the sound wasn't so great in the beginning.
No, I think you got the spirit of what came to be now Mountain Murders even in the earliest stuff, but the audio is pretty rough.
Yeah, I've gone back and listened to a couple of our older episodes, and I'm
Yeah.
like, what were we thinking? Like, we didn't think this was so terrible, but it's pretty bad.
Well, I think that's how it happens with most podcasts. You know, people start with whatever they have at hand and, just kind of on a lark, if you will. And, and then you keep doing it and you upgrade. And we're still certainly not audio engineers. I think that's obvious. But, I think we've certainly improved with some patron help and such.
Baby steps.
And it's quite a bit better now than in the beginning. And we had some great cases. You just came out of the door with bangers, and just some great stories, great cases. So I would enjoy going back over them with you.
Well, let's do that. Can we make a commitment, Dylan, right here and now, that we will re-record some of those old cases?
We're going to promise the listeners.
Can we do this?
Yeah, we're going to keep the promise.
Can we? Because we're really bad at keeping promises.
We're horrible at keeping promises, and we apologize for anyone we have offended with our shitty promise-keeping techniques.
We're here to right those wrongs.
Oh, man, we are going to write them.
We'll be discussing occult activity in the White House.
Now, I must say I immersed myself in occultism and spiritualism most of the day today, so I'm ready, and I have some good things to say about your story.
You're going to contribute something positive and that makes sense?
Before I do fart jokes.
Coherent?
Yeah.
Oh my gosh, it's like a new day.
I'm not doing fart jokes.
It's a new day, it's a new dawn right here at Mountain Murders.
It's 2022.
It's about time you got your shit together, Dylan.
You got to grow up sometime.
We know of 5 first ladies in particular who held moderate to strong interests in the occult. Others would make claims of experiencing the paranormal. Are you ready to get into today's episode?
Yeah.
Continuing our series on just weird shit that goes on in Washington, D.C.
Man, I find this stuff fascinating.
Jane Pierce was the first known first lady occultist in the White House. Do you know much about Jane Pierce or Franklin Pierce, her husband?
I've heard of Franklin Pierce. I'm certainly no expert on all the early presidents, but no, I don't know anything about Miss Pierce.
Okay, well, this should be interesting for you then, Dylan. I didn't know a lot about her either. But it is said that she was a quiet woman, reclusive, and prone to bouts of depression. Sounds familiar.
Did I marry Jane Pierce?
When Jane married her husband Franklin, she was not interested in his political aspirations. Her personality made it difficult for her to mingle in Washington, D.C. social circles. It was just something that she never felt comfortable with. I could relate to that. Would you have a difficult time finding yourself in the spotlight as a politician's husband?
Well, I think, the politicians are clearly very driven, to reach these heights because that's their career This is certainly probably the pinnacle of a politician's career to be the president. And I could really see it being hard for their spouse a lot of the times because they might not want to be in the spotlight, and they kind of have to be. You have to appear in public together, and now you're the first lady. So I could imagine that could be pretty unnerving for a lot of people.
Yeah, I feel like when we had President Trump in the White House, Melania didn't seem all that comfortable with the attention that came along with being First Lady.
No, and that's interesting because she was a model, and certainly, has received lots of attention in different kinds of ways. But no, she certainly didn't seem into it the whole way, right?
Yeah, there are other First Ladies that we've had that seem like they're a shoe-in. They get it. They're comfortable. They don't mind the spotlight. And then others do seem a bit more reticent maybe to be like jumping in, getting involved, taking on some tasks. You know what I mean?
Yeah, it's a lot.
And Jane definitely was not interested in that. Like, she didn't want to have any part of it. When Franklin was a congressman, she attempted to fulfill her duties as a political wife. But she just was like, nah. I mean, she wanted to just live a simple life. She wanted to, homestead, have a farm, raise a family, go to church, be close to her family. Like, she just wasn't interested in any of this stuff. And so by the time Franklin Pierce's name would be thrown into the hat for presidency, she wasn't interested at all. And he actually waited several months to tell her, hey, guess what? I'm the nominee.
Oh, gosh.
Because he knew she wasn't going to be happy about it.
Well, even the potential president or possible president-elect is scared of his wife.
They say happy wife, happy life, Dawn.
And that's no truer words ever spoken.
Unfortunately, the Pierces had several tragedies over the course of their marriage. First, their son Franklin Jr., who was born in 1836, died when he was only 3 days old.
Well, that's sad.
Then Frank Robert, born in 1839, died when he was 4 years old. Their third son, Benjamin Pierce, was born in 1841. Tragically, he would die in a train wreck on the way to Washington, D.C., while accompanying his parents, right after his father won the presidency.
So they lost 3 children under 3 separate circumstances. I don't know how you can continue on after that.
This train derailed, wrecked near Andover, Massachusetts, killed quite a few people. It was a very deadly train wreck. Seriously bad situation. Franklin was attentive and understanding of his wife's needs. She was often granted permission to travel back home to New Hampshire and visit with family. Jane was particularly close to her sisters, and due to her son's tragic death, Jane didn't attend her husband's inauguration. It wasn't until March of 1853 that she finally entered the White House. However, it took her 2 more years to receive publicly at the White House. She asked her uncle's widow, Abigail Kent Means, to perform the official duties of the First Lady, which nowadays might seem very strange if we had like a fill-in First Lady. But during this Victorian era, folks were obsessed with death, so this mourning period didn't seem strange to the public. If anything, they appreciated that she was taking this mourning period seriously and like admired and respected her more.
So basically, to the public, they wouldn't even have to explain why someone's there in her stead, because it's obvious she should be mourning over an extended period of time. Now, they typically mourned for what?
Years.
Year, 2 years?
Yes.
And
I mean, a widow, like a widowed woman a widow might wear black and for the rest of her life after her husband died. She might be in perpetual mourning, and that would not be uncommon.
Would you do that for me?
What do you think?
You already wear black,
I was going to say, I'm already in perpetual mourning for no reason, so.
Nobody would know the difference. They would just be like, where's your big dumb husband at?
Exactly. Where's his big head at? She seemed to be in a permanent state of depression, and she wore black to mourn the death of her children daily. So, when she was fluttering around the White House, seeming forlorn, it was just how Miss Pierce was. Like, they didn't think anything about it. Jane spent a great deal of her time writing these heartbreakingly sad letters to her dead son, Benjamin. Though Jane was deeply religious, even encouraging White House staff to attend church on Sundays, By the way, she took the Sabbath very seriously and didn't want the staff to be working on Sunday. Like, she would tell them, you should just go home or go to church today.
Oh, she wasn't kidding around.
No, so she was like a deeply religious woman. But she was so distraught, Dylan, that she became obsessed with trying to contact her deceased son from beyond the grave.
And she thought she had a good chance of doing that, right?
Now, eventually, she brought a famous trio of spiritualists known as the Fox Sisters to the White House. Let's talk a little bit about spiritualism, Dylan. It was a religious movement that was sweeping the nation at the time. The belief was based on ideas that spirits of the dead exist and can communicate with the living. The afterlife or spirit world is seen by spiritualists not as a static place, but one in which the dead or spirits can evolve.
Yeah, what I find fascinating about spiritualism is even before this period, we've always had some form of it, even if we didn't call it something. Wondering about our ancestors, wondering about the dead. Often, a lot of cultures will display the person who's passed, and in some cultures, they go the Day of the Dead. They go back and will actually spend time with the bodies, or at the grave sites, or bring them. Some cultures actually dig the person up or get them out
Yeah.
and bring them home, which I don't find that scary or creepy. I think that's very sweet and wholesome in a way, wanting to be close to your lost loved one. But yeah, we've always wondered about what happens when you leave this plane of existence.
Well, I think it's interesting as well, as you mentioned, some of the different cultural aspects of death and celebrating death. I think in our culture, at least here in the United States, we view death in a very sad, tragic way. You have these funerals, everybody's very stoic and sad, but a lot of cultures celebrate death as like a journey. It's part of the celebration of life. You're moving from one plane to the next, to the afterlife, what have you. And it's more of a party and celebrating that person's life rather than it being this like tragic moment.
Yeah, and I think that's a good way to view it personally.
And then going back each year and honoring the dead, as you mentioned, like the Day of the Dead. It's big in Mexican culture. I mean, I think that's pretty cool. I think a lot of us don't have that close sort of spiritual relationship with our dead or are deceased as other cultures, perhaps.
Well, no, and I think everyone, when someone passes, it forces you to think of your own mortality, and which is sobering for most people. So I think maybe that's why in our culture we kind of, we don't. It's more of a somber occasion, right?
Some spiritualists believe that the dead could actually make decisions on moral and ethical issues and had a better or greater understanding about the nature of God. So between the 1840s to the 1920s, there were more than 8 million followers of spiritualism in the United States and Europe, mostly from middle to upper class families. So the folks who are following spiritualism, who are believing in this communication with the dead, contacting the spirit world, they were affluent folks.
Yeah, I mean, you discussed this, and I think you pointed out it's pretty obvious why this is the case. For one, the people on the low end of the income bracket, or they're just struggling in the rat race to make it every day.
Yep.
Even more so during these times were even harder. So I mean, you got to do all this hard work just to cook, clean, wash clothes, and also obviously to be a student of spiritualism and to do all these things, these seances, and bring advisors, and mediums in. You need to be able to pay people, cover people's travel, throw large parties of a sort. And so it's, I mean, obviously, poor people can't afford to do these things. So I think it's a very, it's not the first or last time something like this existed for the, upper crust, middle to upper crust.
Spirit mediums were those with special gifts who could communicate with the dead. Anyone could receive spiritual messages, but formal seances that were held specifically by these mediums were said to be more productive.
Okay, so it's like the next level of it.
Right. I mean, you could have a seance and perhaps a spirit would communicate with you, Dylan. But if you're going to hire Miss Cleo to come over, the
Well,
seance might go a little bit better, right?
what you talking about, baby?
I loved her.
You
back
know
in the
that
day.
she didn't made hardly any money off that.
Really?
Basically the people who run that telecommunications company just pretty much used her likeness and all that. I mean, she worked for them,
She
but
was such an early 2000s cultural icon.
oh my, yeah, I mean everybody knows Miss Cleo.
Loved Miss Cleo. The Fox sisters. You know a little bit more about them, Dylan. You've done some intense research into the Fox sisters.
Wow, I broke out in a sweat.
But I'll give you a little bit of background, and then maybe you can share some more information that you have for us. So the Fox sisters were Leah, Margaretta, and Catherine. They were from New York. The two younger sisters were known to use a method they called rapping to communicate with spirits. Their older sister Leah began managing their careers once they sort of got famous, right? The Fox sisters gained national notoriety for being spiritualists. In 1848, Catherine and Margaretta lived in Hydesville, New York with their parents in a house that was allegedly haunted. That's when they began communicating with the ghosts who were making these unexplained noises inside the house. By 1849, they were performing as spiritualists using the rapping method in Rochester for a paid audience. It swept like wildfire. People were so interested that they moved from the Rochester stage into touring basically internationally.
Yeah, if I'm not mistaken, that Rochester venue there sat 400 people. So, like, just in the very beginning,
And they had people traveling from miles away to come see this show.
Yeah, and it was basically a sellout, and people are just raving about it. And I guess they're like, "Wow, we can make money at this."
What else do you know about the Fox sisters?
Well, I do know that rapping and the knocks and noises is a common thing said that the dead are able to do to communicate. So that was no surprise there. And the sisters went on and toured for quite a while, but then they kind of fell apart. And one of the younger sisters there, in the very end of their story, which we could do a whole episode on the Fox sisters.
And we may.
They're very fascinating story all around them. And she actually was paid $1,500 to publicly say they were a flim flam artist, and even demonstrate some of the ways that they created these noises. Because sometime early on, guests and skeptics were invited in a back room to search them, like search through their clothes and disrobe them to see if they had any kind of
tools of rapping noises.
Yeah, any kind of tools or way of making
tap on the bottom of your shoe or something.
Stuff like that, which I think is creepy to let strangers come in and look at these young girls, these young ladies' naked bodies or any of that. But anything for a buck, I guess. But no, one of the younger sisters received $1,500 to say publicly discredit them and say that it was all a farce. And of course, the believers at that point, she was impoverished, full-blown alcoholic. Of course, the true believers say she just did it for the money. She didn't really mean that.
She did it all for the nookie.
Which $1,500 back then was a very large sum of money.
I'm rich, bitch.
So I kind of, if that is what she did, I don't blame her. If I'm poor and there's a chance to get all this money, right?
Jane Pierce brought the Fox sisters to the White House to perform a seance in the White House. Seances in the White House, Dylan.
Okay.
Can you imagine 2022, a seance being held in the White House? People would lose their shit.
Well, that's probably the most tang thing being held at the White House anymore.
Well, this was in order to contact her dead son, Benjamin. After the seance, Jane wrote a letter to her sister explaining that she had had these vivid dreams where Benjamin was speaking to her. She felt a weight had been lifted from her shoulders. Her contact with Benjamin seemed to alleviate some of the guilt that Jane felt about the accident. So if anything, having the seance was a very cathartic experience for Jane Pierce.
So it actually helped her.
Seems like it did her some good. Yeah.
Okay.
Now, do you know a lot about seances?
No, I do know that that is based on the French word for session.
Okay.
Yeah, seance. The French have the greatest words, right?
Yes.
Yeah, they have really the coolest words. But no, I mean, no, I just know the movie version, typical. I've never looked into it for myself. I've never been part of one. And you just surround the table, holding hands. You got the medium, and she's likely going to be possessed by a demon at some point, and then shit's going to pop off, and people are going to start dying.
Why is she going to be possessed by a demon?
Well, that's how it goes in the movies.
Well, okay. So you're right, Dylan. It usually takes place in some sort of dark or dimly lit room.
Lots of velvet.
Maybe 6 to 8 people holding hands in a circle. The spirit will often speak through the medium. And yes, I guess depending on the time frame, maybe there was some velvets involved. Okay. Victorians seem to like their textures.
Okay.
Some nice, Baroque fabric or something.
Yeah, some burgundies, deep purples.
Mary Todd Lincoln is likely the most famous occultist in the White House. So after Mrs. Lincoln heard that Jane Pierce had successfully communicated with her son Benjamin, she wanted the same experience. Her sons Willie and Eddie were both dead, and Mrs. Lincoln was in mourning pretty much the entire time she was the First Lady.
Yeah, and see, that's the great thing about most of your customers or people interested in what you do, being affluent or people, semi-famous, is it's just a word of mouth advertisement. Because, you go do something with them and they're happy with what you did. Then all their friends want to do it. Oh, you helped them. I want you to help me. And so on and so on.
It's like Beetlejuice. We can have fun party tricks at dinner,
Yeah.
right? Invite your ghost friends. Well, Mary Lincoln also had dreams that her husband Abraham was going to be assassinated. She claimed her son Willie stood at her bed every night. Once in the White House, Mary Todd Lincoln began inviting famous mediums and spiritualists to perform seances. She referred to them as calls to the dead.
Ooh.
Most of these seances took place in the Red Room. Abe Lincoln was the ever-supportive husband who would join his wife for these events. Though he didn't believe in the spiritualism of the time, his participation was mostly to placate his wife. Cranston Laurie became a favorite medium of Mrs. Lincoln. Laurie predicted that President Lincoln had enemies in his cabinet who were going to betray him. After witnessing her husband shooting at Ford Theater, it served to provide Mary with more faith in the supernatural. Because not only had she been having these dreams, which she felt like were, like a premonition,
yeah.
but then she has this medium who's telling her, your husband has powerful enemies. I don't think this is going to end well for him. Then he's shot.
Yeah.
While he's sitting next to her. And so after that, she's just like all in with like these supernatural beliefs.
Well, and I mean, from her point of view, you can't blame her because she thinks these things, she believes them. And then now she has a proof of her, what she thought would happen.
After her husband died, Mary Todd Lincoln paid a famous spiritualist photographer to take a picture of her with Abe's ghost. She eventually joined a spiritualist commune where she communicated with the dead on a regular basis. The ghost of Abraham Lincoln is said to haunt the White House. Some of his most famous visits include to First Lady Grace Coolidge, former Prime Minister Winston Churchill,
Ooh.
and Queen Wilhelmina of the Netherlands.
Wow.
So he just pops in, says hey, and then pieces out.
Yeah, he's just like, hey, yo, what up? He's got the big hat. Everybody knows
I'm
who he
Abe,
is.
I'm really tall.
Got the beard. He was doing
gawky and awkward because I'm so tall.
He was doing no shave November long before it was popular.
Just my big hat.
Yeah.
Yep.
He's also a vampire killer.
First Lady Edith Wilson hired an astrologist named Madame Champney to consult her. Champney had also provided spiritual guidance to Florence Harding, another First Lady. Wilson also claimed that the ghost of Dolly Madison encouraged her not to make any changes to the rose garden.
Okay.
Florence Harding. Now, this is a pretty interesting, First Lady who's into the occult, Dylan. She was the wife of Warren G., not of the Nate Dogg fame.
Formerly of the Regulators.
Not getting ready to regulate, but Warren G. Harding. And she was known to be into astrology. She read her horoscope every morning before making any other decisions for the day. She refused to make any decisions until she had her morning horoscope.
Have you ever known someone who's really into their horoscope?
Yeah, I have.
Would actually like read it and be like, this is why this happened, or this is going to happen
Yeah.
because of this?
Yeah.
Really?
Yeah.
Interesting.
Her family was German, and they were superstitious people believing in hexes and spells. Actually, Dylan, we discussed this on a previous episode of this European folk magic. It was called powwow, or it's kind of known as powwow. So her family was kind of that old world belief in this sort of magic, powwow, that kind of thing. So she was superstitious. She actually attended a spiritualist camp as an adult and was steeped in this whole camp was steeped in the occult, and she believed in bad omens, energies. So she was definitely kind of a groovy chick. She would give herself tarot card readings, and once Harding was elected, she would have the Secret Service bring Madame Champney into the White House for psychic readings. Like smuggle her in so she could get these psychic readings.
So she's all in.
She is, and at first she was concerned that once this got out into the public, like her husband would never be elected president. But when people found out, they were just kind of like, okay.
Well, I mean, millions of people are into it. So, and a lot of those people are shot callers and, you know, the upper crust, the moneyed society. So that doesn't surprise me.
And probably the most famous occultist that we've had in the White House, former First Lady Nancy Reagan.
Oh, a modern day one.
She was into astrology. She checked her horoscope every day. She hired a professional astrologer named Joan Quigley after John Hinckley's attempted assassination of the president. And she paid her $3,000 a month to have her basically on call for spiritual guidance. So she
Wow.
could call her any time of the day as much as she needed for spiritual guidance.
She must need a lot of guidance.
Nancy Reagan often called the woman up to 3 times a day, typically, asking for advice. She had a private phone line installed at the White House and at Camp David just to make these secretive phone calls.
So what you're telling me is this socket help craft policy for our nation.
Yeah, a lot of people think that she played a huge role in Reagan's presidency. And there is a book called What Does Joan Say? And she wrote, quote, now this is Joan Quigley's quote, "Not since the days of the Roman emperors and never in the history of the United States presidency has an astrologer played such a significant role in the nation's affairs of state."
Holy shit.
Yeah.
Damn, she was like their Rasputin.
So in 1985, a guy named Donald Reagan took over as chief of staff for President Reagan, and he was informed by Reagan's aide Michael Deaver about Joan Quigley and her role. Reagan, who frequently quarreled with Nancy Reagan, ended up resigning in 1987 after the Iran-Contra affair, and he went on to publish a memoir for the record From Wall Street to Washington, revealing that Nancy Reagan had consulted with Quigley and with astrologer Jean Dixon. And so after this, Quigley was swarmed with media attention, and Nancy Reagan said nobody was hurt by it except possibly me. That was her comment.
Ooh.
And the rest of us that the astrologer affected with her decision making, I guess.
You know, this explains trickle-down economics.
Explains a lot, right? Hillary Clinton received scrutiny after, well, when hasn't she received scrutiny? After telling reporters that she had imaginary conversations with Eleanor Roosevelt. Now, here's the gist of the story. Basically, when she became First Lady, they asked her, how are you adjusting to life in the White House? And Hillary kind of made some joking statements about having these imaginary conversations with Eleanor Roosevelt, that she often felt the former First Lady's presence in the White House. She'd always looked at Eleanor Roosevelt like a role model, and that every day when she would wake up, she would basically ask herself, like, what would Eleanor Roosevelt do?
Oh.
But, of course, the media takes this, runs with it like, oh, she's communicating with the dead in the White House.
She's cracking up.
Yeah.
She's a crackpot.
Right.
And her husband's probably screwing somebody.
Probably screwing the ghost of Eleanor Roosevelt.
Hey, we throw shade everywhere here, bud.
It's true. Now, there are some famous ghosts in the White House, reportedly.
How could there not be? I mean, really.
Mary Todd Lincoln claimed to have heard Andrew Jackson stomping and swearing in the White House. Thomas Jefferson allegedly plays violin in the Yellow Oval Room. Dolly Madison is seen in the Rose Garden. John Tyler's ghost has been seen in the Blue Room proposing to his second wife, Julia.
I wonder if any of those babies' ghosts showed up.
President Reagan would talk about how his dog Rex would bark frantically at the entrance of the Lincoln bedroom and would refuse to enter that room.
I trust the animal over all these other people.
His daughter and son-in-law also saw an apparition in the room more than once that they believed belonged to Abraham Lincoln.
Now, so I wonder if the ghosts of the sacrificed babies come back and haunt anybody, because I'd be mad.
Do you think they do that in the White House?
Wouldn't you?
I think they probably do that over at, the Pentagon.
Yeah, that's probably where the blood machine is.
In the Capitol building.
Yeah.
The first daughter, Jenna Bush Hager, told Hoda Khattab on the Today Show in 2018 that she and her sister Barbara woke up in the middle of the night hearing 1920s piano music coming out of their fireplace.
Wow.
While they lived there.
That would be eerie.
Michelle Obama has confessed that she and her husband Barack experienced strange things in their 8 years at 1600 Pennsylvania Avenue. They would often hear noises. Some members of the family claimed to have felt something chewing or gnawing at their feet.
Oh.
And Abraham Lincoln's ghost is the most seen in the White House.
Yeah, I've always heard of Abe Lincoln's ghost. I have heard of that quite often.
So that kind of continues our series on strange things in Washington. All the seances, Ouija boards.
Economic policy crafted by psychics.
Yeah.
What else?
Astrology, tarot cards. We've got it all.
Now, I know you're going to move on into some of these other issues. I've heard of dark energy, dark forces out of the White House, so I'm not going to broach any of those. But there's actually some pretty incredible tales left to tell about this very subject in Washington.
Oh, yeah?
Yeah, don't you think?
Well, there is a documentary. It's called Demon in the White House. It is available on Discovery Plus. That's where I watched it. It's pretty interesting. It kind of goes into some of the hauntings, some of the grieving first ladies who may have unwittingly invited evil into their home. It's pretty fascinating. You should check it out just for the entertainment value.
Yeah, I'm going to check that out. That sounds pretty cool.
But definitely interesting. I did watch that as part of my research and read a bunch of different articles and news types of stories for this.
A demon in the White House.
Yeah. We've had several. They've been presidents.
Well, yeah, I was going to say that's just another political season for us.
Exactly.
Beelzebub, what do you think about our Foreign Relations Committee?
So, yeah, we'll be back with another offbeat relating to the same topic. I think it's pretty interesting. And, of course, we love a good conspiracy theory here at Mountain Murders.
We do. We do. It just gets my blood a-pumping.
I feel like we should do some kind of live, like Instagram, or maybe we go to TikTok or something, and we should play with a Ouija board.
Ooh.
On the show, right? Do like a live with the Ouija board.
That'd be so much fun, and we get the feedback, and other people can tell us what they think about it.
Oh my gosh,
that sounds
some
cool.
people are not going to be interested in that.
Well, some people will
are
be.
really scared of a spirit board.
Well, that's a very old. That was invented a long time ago, and nowadays, I think we certainly have the game kind of cheesy version of it, don't you think? Because I think it's got a lot to do with the energy and stuff around the board, and I don't know how much energy you get out of a Milton Bradley Ouija board when you pull it out of a new box.
Maybe a lot.
Yeah, well, we did have a Ouija board out the other day.
You got one for Christmas,
and everyone said they were not pushing. Is it the planchette?
Yeah, I believe you were.
I was not.
I believe you were.
I was not pushing it till the end when I was screwing around on the other time. I did. That was the first time I pushed it. When I
See,
was
well, then you're admitting that you pushed it. So how am I to believe that you weren't pushing it the
when I was always
entire time?
is Heather dumb, and it just somehow went to yes. I don't know what happened there.
See, we know that's
The
a lie.
ghost, yeah, the ghost doesn't like you. I can't control what I can't control the next plane of existence, honey. I can't. I've tried.
No one likes me, so what else is new?
I love
I'm
you.
very antisocial.
I don't like you. I love you. And I love the great work you do here, and I can't wait till the next one.
All right, we will be back. We have a brand new true crime case coming out, so make sure check out this week's Mountain Murders. Dylan, if folks want to reach out and get in touch with us, how can they do that? Dropping an email
At mountainmurderspodcast@gmail.com.
It's a great way. If you want more content, you can subscribe at patreon.com/Mountain Murders Podcast. For as little as $1 a month, you can support the show and get some bonus content. We hope you guys have a great week.